The D&T Association recommends that design and technology departments should undertake risk assessments to provide safe systems of work by firstly discussing and clarifying with the employer the risk assessment procedure that should be followed. Secondly, by adopting model risk assessments for each activity being undertaken within the department from BS 4163/2007 and the CLEAPS model risk assessments for design and technology. And thirdly, by adapting these as necessary to suit local circumstances. And lastly, by cross-referencing completed risk assessments into your schemes of work or lesson plans as appropriate to highlight the most significant hazards involved in the activities taking place. All activities which have the potential to cause harm require risk assessments, and significant findings must be documented. Risk assessments will be mainly involved with all those activities contained within your scheme of work. However, risk assessments must also be completed to cover activities such as those undertaken by technicians within preparation areas and by learners during after-school activities organised by the department. As a general guide, it is recommended that separate risk assessments should be undertaken for all of those activities that have been undertaken within a department which are detailed separately within British Standard 4163/2007. This will allow the department to demonstrate that they have considered the specific hazards and control measures that need to be in place in order to safely undertake each separate activity. For example, when undertaking risk assessments in food technology on portable food mixing equipment, the British Standard has prepared separate model risk assessments on food processing machines and liquidizers, and separate model risk assessments on portable food mixing machines and portable food blending machines. When assessing portable tools in workshops, the British Standard has separate model risk assessments on each different tool. It's appropriate, therefore, for design and technology departments to complete separate risk assessments for each of these pieces of equipment used within the department, so as to highlight the specific hazards and control measures which relate to each of these different activities. Following discussion at the school and a visit to the D&T show at the NEC, this department decided to purchase a laser to extend the CAD/CAM opportunities available for learners. Having taken delivery and received basic training in the use of the machine from the supplier, the department were ready to put their laser into use. Time then to complete their risk assessment. Who should undertake the process of adapting and adopting the model risk assessments? Clearly, they should be undertaken by experienced colleagues who are familiar with the activities within each of the specialist areas. Schools often find it beneficial to get colleagues to work in pairs when undertaking this task. This form can be used by departments as a template for adopting and adapting model risk assessments, and is available in the D&T Association publication Risk Assessment in Secondary Schools and Colleges D&T Teaching Environments. Completion of the form for each activity will involve, firstly, a description of the activity, detailing the equipment or substances being used, for example in this case use of the laser, and secondly, a statement adopting the model risk assessment. The D&T department adopts the model risk assessments from BS 4163/2007 and CLEAPS. At this point, of course, you will have to familiarise yourselves with the hazards and control measures as set out in these model risk assessments. You will then need to adapt the model risk assessment to identify additional hazards and control measures to those detailed in the model, based upon your knowledge and understanding of your local situation. This could include, for example, a consideration of the suitability of the overall working environment in which the activity is taking place, and the specific type and working features of the equipment being used. You will need to ask, for example, firstly, do the model risk assessments fail to mention hazards that you have identified? But also, do the model risk assessments list control measures for the activity which you cannot currently meet? Does the room have any layout, space or circulation problems which affect the activity? In this case, for example, that some materials, such as MDF, birch plywood, fleece, etc., can be set alight by the laser. Is the activity going to be undertaken by colleagues or learners? In the case of colleagues, do they have the skills, experience and training to undertake the activity? In the case of learners, do they have the maturity and experience to undertake the activity? What training is required to undertake the activity, both by colleagues and learners, for example using focus tasks? What records of training by learners will be kept? For example on a spreadsheet, or by using a driving licence to demonstrate individual learners' competency, as already introduced into many schools. Should the activity be restricted to learners working in small groups? Should it be restricted to learners in particular key stages? What level of supervision will be necessary for the activity, one-to-one or whole class? Will the activity require the support of the technician? Risk assessments are explicitly required by the COSH regulations. Will local exhaust ventilation be required? Will any personal protective equipment be required? And how will the equipment be maintained? Finally, the form should show the names of the assessors, the date of the assessment and date of review, the signature of both the head of department and head teacher or key manager within the school, that is, the person identified in the school's health and safety policy as having overall responsibility for health and safety within that establishment, which is normally the head teacher. While employers can delegate to employees the function of setting up a system of assessing risks based on model risk assessments, they have a duty to check that the function is carried out. Photocopies of the relevant model risk assessment should be attached to the form, and it is recommended that at least one signed hard copy of the form with photocopies attached is held centrally within the department. Further copies can be held electronically, as long as they are easily retrievable. All risk assessments should be reviewed on a regular basis, for example annually when courses will be changing. However, they will also need to be reviewed when the conditions in which the activity is taking place change. For example, changes in legislation or changes in curriculum. Following the installation of new or different equipment, or when there are changes in working procedures, or when a larger class is involved, or when students with SEN or EAL are involved. Following an accident, incident or near miss, or following any complaints. But remember, sensible risk management is about taking practical steps to protect colleagues and learners from harm. It's not about bureaucratic back-covering. The law does not expect that you will eliminate all risk, but colleagues and learners should be protected as far as is reasonably practicable.